let me start off by saying, yay, it's thematic unit time, so it's done. I'm very happy about this. It's been very stressful. But okay, so my thematic unit this semester that I've chosen is patterns here, patterns there, patterns everywhere. I really like math, so I thought this one would be fun. Well, okay, so for my first lesson plan, it's math. And it's going to be over sequences and patterns in math. So I chose to teach about functions. Well, because we're doing functions, I'm just going to show what happens, how to show patterns and everything in functions. Well, as the students are walking in, I'll be standing at the door with my KWL sheets. I'll give them each one a blank one, and I'll tell them to go sit at their desk and read the objective on the board. And they will write on that KWL sheet. They will fill out the K, which is what they know, and they will fill out the W, which is what they want to know. They'll leave the L part, what they've learned, blank, because that's going to be done at the end of class. After they read the objective and see that the class is about patterns and functions, they will then fill out those two parts and what they know about patterns, what they want to know about patterns and functions, and all that. After the first 5 minutes is over, then I'll tell them, okay, everyone, put that aside. We're going to get on with class. As we get on with class, I'm going to first start talking about functions and how you're going to always have an independent variable and a dependent variable. The dependent variable is going to pretty much, in our case today, be y. And we have to always do the same exact rule to x to get y. So, and then I have two examples in which I'm going to put on the board and we're going to do as a whole, as a class as a whole. And I'm going to pass these out to all my students. Once I pass all these out to my students, I will then go through them with them. Well, the first one, as I included in this assignment, it'll be x will be 0, y will be 5. X will be 5, y will be 10. X will be 10, y will be 15. And it's a chart. And so they are to show, okay, hey, I added 5 to 0 to get 5. I added 5 to 5 to get 10. I added 5 to 10 to get 15. So at the side, they're going to fill out, okay, add 5 every time. And then the rule is going to be x plus 5 equals y. After doing this, then they'll say, okay, we see that it's always the same. The rule for the function is always going to be the same with every x. So that is a big deal that they know that the rule is going to remain the same. So then I'll give them the second example. Second example is going to be x is 20, y is 5, x is 16, y is 4, x is 12, y is 3, and then so on. And then they'll think, okay, well, to go from 20 to 5, you have to divide 4. It's a trial and error. That's the one thing I also push in this class is trial and error. You're going to have to try different things. Do I add? Do I subtract? Do I multiply? Do I divide? And that's okay because you know what? I still do that and I like math. So I think trial and error is a really good way with math. So they are going to realize we have to divide 4 every time. So on the side, they'll write that they divide 4 every single time. And then therefore the rule will end up being x divided by 4 equals y. So once they come up with this, we'll be done. We'll go as a class, then I'll tell them they're already in groups of 3. So I'll tell them, okay, now you're going to work with your partners. I'm going to walk around their class and give every single group a Ziploc bag with 4 index cards. On each index card is 1 number. So they will have a total of 4 numbers at each group. Also, I will pass out the information sheet so the students don't have to constantly ask me what they're doing over and over again. They can just read that. And it'll have the rule, the information, the rules, everything. Well, as they look, each number, they'll have different numbers, and they are to put these numbers in such an order to where they can make their own rule. So this is really going to help them to think critical. And I think is really good because it'll push them, and it's also kind of cool because it puts it in their hands to make whatever rule they want. But it has to work every single time, once again, to get that y. So let's say, for instance, they have numbers and they have a 2, a 4, a 6, and an 8, just for instance, each number. And then they say, okay, I can put it in this order. I can put it in 8, 6, 4, 2, or I could put it in 2, 4, 6, 8. 2, 4, 6, 8, you're going to add, the rule is going to be x plus 2 equals y. 8, 6, 4, 2, you're going to say x minus 2 equals y. So they're going to come up with this rule on their own. And then when everyone's done, they are to go up to the board and put the numbers on the board. And they are supposed to show, okay, what they're doing each time and what the final rule is. So to kind of show all the class members the different thing. And I think also it'd be really cool if when they're showing it, they can give the class a chance. Well, do you know what this is? So they can kind of teach and they can feel really cool as they teach and all that. So once they're done with that, then I'll set them back down and I'll hand out another graphic organizer, in which this will have 3 function charts on it. And they'll be blank, and they'll have, of course, the X and they'll have the Y, but they're to show what's happening every single time and what's the final rule for all 3. They're going to work on all 3 of these, and once I feel like the whole class is done, then I will start beginning to ask them, hey, Chris, what did you get for, what did you get for the first one, and why did you get it? Do you mind explaining it? And if Chris is having trouble, then I can say, hey, Samantha, do you think you can help Chris out? And because I think that's really good. I think the more you teach something, the better you become at it. If she can't explain it, or if I feel like Chris is not going to like that, then I will explain it myself until I feel like all my students understand the topic. Once we go through all of them, if we have a lot of extra time in class, then I'll make some more on the board and we can do them as a whole, and I can, try to call on students to do some as well. Then last but not least, they'll fill out their L part, in the last part of class, their L of what they learned for the class, so they can always remember it, and then once the bell rings, they're free. So the next class is going to be social studies. Social studies, we got to show sequences and patterns in social studies. And I thought to myself, okay, well, there's a lot of patterns in history. It repeats itself like crazy, but I wanted to do something really exciting and really cool and really different. So I came across the fact that slaves used to use quilts with patterns on them to as a way to communicate to other slaves. And I thought that was really cool, especially for middle school kids. I think that's pretty cool. So then what we have that day is the students are going to walk in that day, and I will be sitting at the door once again with their their blank KWL sheets, and they are to sit down, read the objective that's about, slaves and, quilts and codes and all this, and codes and sequences and patterns, and they're supposed to fill out their K and their W, what they know about all the slaves in this and what they want to know. Once the 5 minutes are over, then they'll sit down, and I will begin to talk to them, and I will tell them about how, slavery, how slaves wanted to escape, and how slaves, they would do all these different ways, but then they would get caught by their masters and they'd be in trouble. So then they would all sneak away, and they would follow the stars, or they'd have the Underground Railroad, or they'd have boats waiting on them, and all these different forms of how they escaped, but they had no way to speak to each other. So back then they would do laundry a lot, and they would hang the quilts to dry. So nothing looked abnormal about a hanging quilt, but these quilts, they had different patterns on them, and if they had a certain pattern, it meant follow the Northern Star, for instance, or hey, make sure you pack extra goods today because it's a long trip. And they would have different meanings, and or hey, you get ready to pack right now. Different meanings. So I'll go through it, but I won't go too much. I'll show them some examples of some of them, but I won't go too much into detail with it. So then after that, I'm going to have the students who are already in groups. They're in groups of 2, and I'm going to walk around the class, and I'm going to on each thing, I'm going to pass out a picture of a quilt, and each group is going to get a picture of a quilt. And they then I will make sure they have construction paper passed out to them, markers and map pencils. They'll have all these things passed out to them, and then on top of that, an information sheet. So they don't have to ask for directions over and over again, because I know middle school students will do anything to stop. So I will then include that, and once I include that, I will tell them, okay, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your quilt. You are going to read on your information sheet. It's going to say the directions on top of all the information about your quilt, and specifically. So then they are to redraw their quilt, make it look as cool as they want, as long as it looks just like the quilt I give them. And then they are going to write down all their information that they learned about the quilt, what the quilt is used for. It's not a lot. It won't have a lot. It'll be one sentence, and they'll have to include the name and what the symbolic meaning of the quilt was. So once they do that, then they are to stand up in front of the class and show everyone their quilt, because none of the class has seen any of the quilts yet, and show them, hey, this is my quilt. It's called the Broken Bow, and and so they're supposed to go through, talk about their quilt and what the symbolic meaning of the quilt is. Well, all the students are to listen to all these quilts. They are to listen because they have a worksheet coming up right after. Once they have this worksheet, once everyone's done talking about their quilt, then I will then pass out my graphic organizer, and it's a matching sheet for the quilts, and it'll have all the quilts drawn out for them. It'll have every quilt done, and then of course they have to match it with its symbolic meaning and its name. So that'll just test what all they listen to. If they are struggling, if they can't find what one of them means, then I will, then they'll ask me, and then I'll tell them, hey, 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 I don't know, hey John, didn't you have the North Star quilt? Didn't you have that one? Or I'll point at the picture. Didn't you have this quilt? Do you think you can explain once again to Kendra what that quilt was? And then she'll say, okay, it was the North Star. It was, used to say, hey, follow the North Star. So it'll help them. And then there, of course, to fill out the last part of the graphic organizer, which says, why did the slaves use quilts? How did no one catch on to the coded quilt patterns? And what was your favorite quilt you learned about today, and why? So they're filling out these out. I also have the answer sheet included, so of course I could be on top of my game and everything. So they are to fill all this out. Once they are done with this, then they will fill out the L on their KWL sheet saying what they learned today, and then they'll pack up their bags and leave when the bell rings. And the last day is science. The science lesson plan, they're going to walk in the room once again. I'll be standing at the door with their blank KWL sheet. They'll sit down, they'll see the objective on the board, that it's about Galilean moons and moon, and the solar system, Earth, moons, all of this, and that's what their TEK will say. And so then they'll have to fill out their K, what they know about this, and what their W, what they want to know about it. After the first 5 minutes are over, then they will all put that aside, and I will begin to talk about how, in the solar system, sometimes planets can have more than one moon. For instance, Jupiter has more than 60 moons, but however, Galileo, he discovered the 4 largest moons of Jupiter. And the 4 largest moons he named them after himself, Galilean moons. And so these moons, they are Io, they're Ganymede, Callisto, and Europa. And so I will talk about these moons. I'll show a picture. I'll have pictures printed out. So I'll have pictures. I'll put them on the board and I'll talk to them. I won't go too much into detail about them. I'll just introduce them. So once I talk to them, then I'll tell them, okay, you are already set up in groups of 4. So now I'm going to pass out these papers. I'll go on, and what I'll do is I will pass out the pictures that I used on the board. I will put those on each person's desk, and it'll say the name of the moon. I'll give them a paper, this is the name of their moon, and then of course I'll give them an information sheet of what they need to do. And what they will need to do is, they can use their devices that we have in class. They can actually use their electronic devices as long as they are staying on topic, in which then that will mean I will need to walk around the room extra to make sure they are staying on topic. They will use this to look up all the information about their Galilean moon that was chosen for them. But on the information sheet, it will also tell them that they need to focus on 5 different things. They need to focus on the diameter of the moon in kilometers, the mass in kilograms, the mean orbital radius in kilometers, the orbital period of the moon, and then of course just add interesting facts about the moon. They need more than one, so just interesting facts about the moon. And what they'll do is they'll put all this information down, and then on a piece of paper as a group, they will all write their names. They will write a little, just a 1 paragraph. If they're feeling crazy, 2 paragraph report over this moon. Once I feel like everyone's done and the time has come, then I will have them all stand up as a group, and they will talk about their moon, and they will talk about everything. Well, before they go up there and talk about it, I will then pass out everyone's worksheet. And because I feel like this is a very lengthy assignment, so we want to make sure we get everything done in time and the students know about the moons. So I will then pass out their graphic organizer, and it's going to be a chart, and it'll have each name of the moon, each 4 moons written down, and the pictures of the moon next to them. And then on the chart, the diameter part will be empty, the mass part, the mean orbital radius, the orbital period, and then it'll say interesting Galilean moon fact. All those will be empty, and the student are to fill that out as their peers are presenting. So this gives them a chance to really pay attention, not joke around too much, and to actually, because their grade depends on it. So their students are to present their thing and present their facts for their peers to fill out their charts, and then also just present it, which I know can be really hard for some students, but also it'll make them really know the material well. Once everyone's done presenting, every student should have their chart filled out. So then at that point, then they will fill out the L. They're what they've learned in class today on their KWL sheet. And then after that, when the bell rings, it's done. And so that's my thematic unit. Bye.